This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com with a quick UFO news update. A couple days ago, I discussed a statement to Congress that highly credible investigative reporter George Knapp provided to Congress related to Russian jets getting shot down by UFOs in the late 80s/early 90s. The link to that is in the description. There's another part of his statement to Congress that I didn't want to get into in that update because it was already long enough, but I'll just discuss it here quickly. George Knapp is friends with billionaire businessman Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace, a guy that I would love to interview one day. He is owner of a vast real estate and hotel property chain that's in multiple states, but he has always been interested in UFOs. Well, since he was about 10 years old anyways, he began funding UFOs and working for UFO organizations, and actually spent more of his own money on UFO investigations than any person in the world, tens of millions of dollars. Created his own investigation organization, the National Institute for Discovery Science, back in 96. Anyways, at one point, the government was getting 22 million related to researching UFO related things that was secured by Senator Harry Reid. And apparently this money went into an effort managed by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA. The original program was called the Advanced Weapons Systems Applications Program, and the subsidiary for this program, like, they contracted it out to Bigelow Aerospace, owned by Robert Bigelow. And apparently the focus of this study was not just military encounters with UFOs, but other encounters with commercial jets, etc. However, George Knapp went on record in this sworn statement to say that one of the conditions of the contracts between the Defense Intelligence Agency and Bigelow Aerospace was, quote, that Bigelow's aerospace plant in Las Vegas must be engineered so that it could accept, store, and study certain exotic materials, end quote. So in other words, one of the conditions, thank you, Little Bindy, for the tip, by the way, of having this, and he's given a sworn statement here, is that Bigelow Aerospace had to have an area of its plant that could store exotic materials, and I'm going to assume that a lot of that special storage area would probably have a lot to do with contamination and avoiding contaminations, because what a lot of people don't realize is, like, wherever these supposed exotic crafts are coming from, some of the materials might be hazardous to our health or might contaminate areas, right? Because who knows what kind of stuff is on these planets. It could be hazardous, so of course you'd have to have special areas. But the point of this is George Knapp, who is known as a very good friend of Robert Bigelow, who owned Bigelow Aerospace, he went on record here saying that Bigelow Aerospace needed an area to house exotic materials. So obviously, if it needed that to be part of this government program and get some of the funding from this government program, there had to have been something to store. David Grush, who was one of the people that testified before Congress at that hearing, had said that there's numerous private companies storing these exotic materials, and he's even alleging that there might be multiple species of aliens recovered, actual biological bodies. He also, David Grush, another one of Grush's claims, by the way, that's been in the news lately, was that the Vatican actually somehow had their hand. I guess the Vatican have a whole um, space related section to the Vatican. There's a whole astrology section to the Vatican. Somehow in the 40s, apparently the Vatican got a hold of a UFO, a crashed UFO, eventually sold it to the U.S., and that was supposedly, according to Gresh, the first UFO that got in the hands of the U.S. through the Vatican. Numerous news sources have tried to get a comment from the Vatican about this, and they've refused to comment. NASA is supposed to be having a UFO hearing soon. Paul Hellyer, former Defense Minister of Canada, one of my most famous interviews, said that NASA knows about UFOs. Obviously, if anyone would, it would be NASA, so who knows how honest those hearings will be. But there were, by the way, I mean, there was 4 crashes earlier this year in about March, around the time Batista's film came out. That Cabin in the Woods with Batista, because I remember the news came out that night after I'd watched the film. The first one was a Chinese spy balloon. The other 3 that were supposedly shot down, each with $700,000 missiles, and one of them missed. So there's actually 4 $700,000 missiles shooting down these other 3 unidentified aerial phenomenon. We never found out what those were. We never found out. There was never any pictures released. One of them, at least one of them, possibly 2 of them, crashed over Canada. We never heard what these things were. Now, I'm not saying they were UFO. Were unidentified flying objects, 100%. But I just find it weird that the other 3, there was no answers given. So I found that weird. Big Fish says Russia have a craft. Apparently a lot's going on with Russia. Look at the link in the description. Apparently in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a time when relations were decent with the US and Russia, and George Knapp was able to talk to Russian officials. And they had a whole program investigating UFOs because there had been incidents where they had shot down Russian jets. And apparently, at least in the 90s, the solution of the program was to leave the UFOs alone because their powers of destruction are far worse than Russia's, and it's not worth potentially causing massive issues with U.S. or with Russian military losing their lives over trying to shoot down these UFOs. Paul Hellyer is untrustworthy? I don't know. I don't believe everything he says because he didn't have... I don't believe some of the secondhand information he said because I think when I interviewed him he was 96. But I actually was talking to Paul Hellyer for like 2 years before that interview, and I spent time with him that day in his house. Really nice guy. And the reason he wanted people to know, he was the highest ranking official to go on record saying UFOs are as real as airplanes in the sky. By the way, he was a pilot. Was he wanted this information out there. All of his theories, like, are aliens only here to save the environment? I don't buy that. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. But as I said, he had numerous people in his ears, and he was getting up there in ages. By the time I did the interview with him, I don't think, and many people have said, including Tom DeLonge, that not all species of aliens, if it is aliens in these UFOs, and again, these things might be from our own planet. Okay, no one really knows where they're from or is publicly talking about where they're from. They could be from outer space, or they could be from places here, or they could be interdimensional. That one's the least likely. But, I mean, everyone on Earth does not have the same intention, so how can we say every other civilization and species of potential aliens in the entire universe can have only the intention of, oh, please save your environment. Of course, they might have interest in our environment. They keep going underwater. What the hell is underwater that interests them? They are very interested in nuclear energy, but I wouldn't say, oh, don't worry about these things. Just ignore them. But lots of news is coming out, and I just wanted to share that with you. That's a very credible reporter going on record saying that his friend Robert Bigelow, Bigelow Aerospace, part of his deal with the government was his plant had to be able to house exotic materials. Okay? I mean, and again, the one thing I'll say too, the other thing, even if they have the best intentions, and keep in mind, there is a lot of these animal mutilation cases and even several human mutilation cases out there. But even if they have the best intentions, what if they just contaminate Earth through us not being able to take the cross-contamination from whatever stuff comes from their planet that might be coming out of potential UFOs? I don't know. I'm just saying that it's not something we should just ignore. I'm very interested in this stuff. Non-human biologics is mostly lab-bred chemical animal experiments. There you go. Could be anything. I just wanted to share that news. I'll keep you guys up to date with UFO news because I research this stuff every day. Wish everyone a wonderful day. I'm going to drink some coffee here and get back to work with my beautiful Disney mug. Hannibal drinking from a Disney Mickey Mouse mug. Very funny. It was my grandmother's.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos,